I remember the exact moment I decided to stop. It was a Tuesday. 6:47 a.m. I was at the kitchen sink, washing Richard's coffee mug for the third time that morning, because he'd left it dirty on the counter twice already. Then I heard him from the bedroom. "Babe, did you pay the car insurance? They're saying something's expired." Not "good morning." Not "thank you for the coffee I already brewed." Not even my name. Just "did you pay?" I set the mug down slowly. My hands were still wet. I looked out the window at the oak tree in our backyard, the one we'd planted on our 5th anniversary. I thought about who I was back then. How certain I'd been that Richard Trent was the man God made specifically for me. 10 years. That's how long I'd been Deja Trent. And for all 10 of those years, I paid for everything. Not metaphorically. Literally. The mortgage. The groceries. Both cars. The streaming services. The gym memberships. Birthday gifts for his mother. Co-pays when his back went out last spring. I ran a tight household budget spreadsheet that Richard had never once opened. He worked, I'll give him that. A steady job at a logistics company downtown, pulling in decent money. But somehow, every bill, every subscription, every unexpected expense landed in my lap. And I paid. Every single time. Without a word. Because that's what a good wife does. Right? That's what I told myself. But standing there that morning, something inside me went quiet. Not angry. Quiet. Decided quiet. I picked up my phone. Opened my notes app. Typed 4 words, day 1. Clock is running. I didn't tell Richard. I didn't warn him. I just stopped. I want you to understand something before I go further. I am not a petty woman. I'm 34, black, with a master's in public health. I run a mid-size nonprofit. I mentor 4 young women in my community. And I still manage to have dinner on the table 4 nights a week. Petty isn't in my vocabulary. This wasn't revenge. It was research. I called my best friend, Bianca, that afternoon from my car during lunch. Bianca has known me since Howard, freshman year, room 214. She's the only person I tell the full truth to. "So you just stopped," she said. Stopped, I confirmed. Everything that isn't directly attached to my own survival. My half of the mortgage stays. My gas. My food when I'm alone. Everything else, Richard's gas, his lunches, his subscriptions, household extras, I'm done. Silence. Then, "Deja, what are you expecting to find?" I stared at the steering wheel. I want to know who he becomes when the money stops. I want to see the real man I married. That was day 1. Richard came home that night in a fine mood. He'd grabbed takeout, at his own expense, shockingly. We watched TV. Everything was normal. I smiled at him across the couch and thought, "You have no idea, baby." The experiment had begun. Day 3 told me everything. Friday evening. I came home exhausted. Feet hurting. Head pounding. I'd skipped lunch again because a grant proposal deadline had swallowed my afternoon whole. Richard was already home. Not on the couch. At the kitchen table. Laptop open. Expression tight. "Hey," I said, dropping my bag. "Hey." He didn't look up. I went to the fridge. Low on groceries, intentionally. I pulled out leftover rice and started heating it. Then he spoke. The ESPN subscription got declined. I kept my back to him. Deja. His voice had an edge. The ESPN subscription. It got declined. Did you update the card? I turned around slowly. No. Why not? Because I didn't. He stared at me. Then back at the laptop. Can you just fix it real quick? The game starts in 20 minutes. And there it was. Not, can I have the card information so I can fix it myself? Not, I'll take care of it. Not even a please. Just can you fix it? Something calcified in my chest. Something soft and hopeful went hard and permanent in that single sentence. I said, I think your card works fine, Richard. And I walked to the bedroom. Behind me, I heard him curse under his breath. And I thought, that curse tells me more than 10 years ever did. I need to give you the full picture, because this story didn't start on day one. It started the year we got married. Richard and I met at a mutual friend's cookout in Atlanta. He was funny. Attentive. Had this deep laugh that made me feel like everything was okay. We dated 3 years before the wedding. In those years, he was generous. Paid for dates. Surprised me with flowers. Once drove 4 hours just because I'd had a rough week. I thought I knew him. What I didn't know. What I was too young and too in love to notice, was that his generosity had a pattern. He was giving when he was chasing. When he felt settled. Comfortable. Certain of me. The giving quietly stopped. First sign came 6 months after the wedding. I paid a joint credit card bill and noticed his half was short. He apologized. Said he'd been tight that month. I covered it. By year 2, I was covering his portion regularly. By year 3, it wasn't even discussed. My mother, Artis, noticed before I did. She visited for Thanksgiving in year 4 and pulled me aside in the kitchen. Baby, she said, your husband sat down to eat, and you stood over that stove for 2 hours. Does he do that often? I told her it was fine. I was the better cook. She looked at me the way only a mother can, with love and heartbreak fused together, and said, Deja, fine isn't the same as good. I carried those words for 6 years before I finally understood what she meant. Artis died 2 years ago. Heart failure. Sudden. I grieved alone because Richard was at a work retreat and only came home 3 days later. And I still paid the hospital bills. By day 7, the cracks were showing. Richard navigated the household like a man who'd suddenly discovered the lights had switches. He'd just never been expected to find them himself. He ran out of protein powder. Normally, I'd have noticed and added it to the grocery order. This time, I didn't. He stood in front of the empty cabinet for a full minute, then closed it and said nothing, but the moment that cracked something open was day 6, when his coworker Kenneth came by. Kenneth is one of those men who observes things. He'd been Richard's friend for 8 years. I'd always thought he was quietly suspicious of me. Turned out he was suspicious for me. He walked in, sat down, looked around at the half-stocked kitchen, then looked at Richard. You cook, he asked. Richard laughed awkwardly. Deja usually handles it. Kenneth looked at me, something careful and searching in his eyes. How you doing, Deja? Living my best life, Kenneth. Want some water? I'm drinking the water Richard bought. The silence got thick. Richard shifted. Kenneth left 20 minutes later. As he passed me in the hallway, he said quietly, Don't let them dim you. I didn't know what he knew. But I filed it away. After he left, Richard was quieter than usual. Almost subdued. I watched him from across the room, wondering what Kenneth had seen that I was only now learning to see clearly. And I thought about what Bianca had said on day 1. What are you expecting to find? More than I bargained for, that's what. Day 11. I was working from home. Richard thought I was on a call, office door closed. I was actually sitting at my desk with my headphones off, reading a report in silence. He was in the kitchen. I heard his voice drop. Then I heard a name I didn't recognize. Veronica, I told you it's not a good time. I stopped moving. Barely breathed. Things are weird here right now. She's been acting different. Pause. No, I can't come through tonight. I said no. My heart did something I can't accurately describe. Not racing. More like collapsing methodically. Like a building scheduled for demolition. Orderly. Inevitable. He laughed at something she said. A private laugh. The kind couples share. You're crazy. That's what he said. You're crazy. And it was tender. Affectionate. The way he used to talk to me. I sat at my desk for 45 minutes after he hung up. I did not cry. I just processed. Veronica. I didn't know her. I'd never heard that name in connection with Richard. But something in the way he spoke it, comfortable, familiar, lowercase, told me this was not new. I opened my notes app, day 11. There is a Veronica. This changes the experiment. It doesn't stop it. It expands it. I called Bianca. Girl, she said when I told her. I'm getting in my car. Don't, I said. Not yet. I need to think. Because here's the thing, I was no longer just testing Richard's financial dependence. I was now cataloging the entire architecture of my marriage. Bianca came anyway. Of course she did. She pulled up Saturday morning with her overnight bag and a bag of groceries she bought herself, specifically so Richard couldn't use them. She is that kind of friend. We sat on the back porch while Richard was at the gym, also on his own dime now, and I told her everything. The Veronica call. The finances. Day 3. My mother's words. Bianca listened without interrupting. Then she set down her tea. Deja, I need to tell you something. And you cannot be mad at me. I looked at her. I heard something back in February from Keisha. You know Keisha's cousin works at that logistics company. My throat tightened. She said there was a woman Richard was friendly with. Described her as close. I didn't tell you because I didn't have proof. And I didn't want to blow up your marriage on secondhand gossip. Bianca. That was 5 months ago. I know, Deja. I'm sorry. I kept waiting for it to be nothing. I stood up. Not in anger at Bianca. I understood why she'd waited. But I needed to be standing for what I was feeling. 10 years. And somewhere in those 10 years, all while I was paying bills, writing grants, covering his protein powder, sending flowers to his mother, grieving mine alone, there was a Veronica. What are you going to do? Bianca asked. Finish the 30 days, I said. I need every piece of information before I move. She nodded slowly. Then I looked out at the oak tree. Then I plant something new. Day 14. The halfway mark. Richard had figured out something was different. He hadn't figured out what, but the pattern had disrupted enough that he was sniffing around the edges of it. He brought it up during dinner. He'd cooked, which alone told me how off balance he was feeling. Pasta. Overcooked. I ate it without comment. You've been distant, he said. I've been busy. Deja. He put his fork down. Is something wrong? I looked at him across the table. This man I'd built a decade with. I thought about Veronica. I thought about my mother's words. I thought about day 3 and that ESPN subscription and the casual, reflexive expectation in his voice. What would something wrong look like, Richard? I asked. He frowned. What kind of question is that? Just tell me. If something was wrong with me, if I was struggling, what would you notice? What would change for you? He was quiet for a moment. I'd notice. What would you do? He shifted. I'd ask you about it. Like I'm doing now. I nodded. Took a bite of pasta. Okay. That was it. The truth was, I believed him. He'd notice. He'd ask. And then he'd wait for me to fix it. That was the pattern. It had always been the pattern. Richard Trent was a man who identified problems and then waited for Deja to solve them. I'd just never seen it so clearly before. I pulled out my phone under the table. Typed 2 words. Day 14. Clarity. Day 17. Everything I feared became real. I know what you're thinking. Did you go looking? Yes. I did. I'm not ashamed of it. I took the name, the logistics company, and the pieces I had, and I handed them to my colleague Jason, who I trust completely, and asked him to be discreet. Jason has resources I don't ask questions about. 2 days later, he texted me a LinkedIn profile. Veronica Payne. 31, marketing coordinator. Same company as Richard. She was beautiful. I want to be honest about that because the story demands it. She was objectively beautiful. And she had a warmth in her profile picture, an easy, natural smile that I recognized because I used to wear it too. Before life with Richard made me manage everything instead of feel everything. I didn't reach out to her. I want to be clear. This was not about her. Veronica Payne was not my villain. She was just a woman who may or may not have known the full truth. I gave her the benefit of the doubt. My villain was the man asleep in our bed. I sat in my parked car in a grocery store lot for 20 minutes, just staring at her photo. Then I called my brother Damon in Houston. Damon is 5 years older. Former military. The most grounded person I know. I told him everything. He was quiet for a long time. Then, you need to know for certain before you move. And when you move completely. No halfway. You hear me? Yes. I'm flying in day 30. I hadn't asked him to. He just decided. That's what it means to have family. Day 22. I'd planned to wait. 8 days left. I decided to finish what I started. But Richard forced my hand. He came home that evening with a mood I'd never seen on him. Nervous and aggressive at once. The particular combination of a person who knows they've been discovered but hasn't confirmed it yet. He sat across from me and said, "Who did you have looking into me?" I didn't flinch. "I don't know what you mean." "Jason from your office." He was asking around at my company. Jason had been less discreet than I'd hoped. I felt a flash of frustration, but kept my face still. "Richard." "What?" "Who is Veronica?" The silence that followed was the loudest thing I've ever heard. His face went through 5 emotions in 4 seconds. Denial formed, I watched it form. And then something in him seemed to calculate the odds of that working, and it died. "It's not what?" "Don't." I said just that word. "Don't." He stopped. "I have been paying for this life for 10 years, Richard. Every bill. Every car payment. Every gift for your mother." My voice stayed level. "I was proud of that. While you were building something with someone else." "Deja, I can explain." "I know you can. I'm sure you're very good at explaining." I stood up. "But I don't need the explanation. I need you to understand that I already know everything I need to know." I walked to the bedroom and locked the door. What Richard didn't know, what I hadn't told a single person except Damon, was what I'd done in the background of these 30 days. 3 weeks before day 1, I'd had a quiet coffee with a woman named Sylvia Marsh. Sylvia is a family attorney. She's also a client of our nonprofit, which means she owes me no professional loyalty. She gives it freely. We talked for 2 hours. I gave her the financial history. The spreadsheets. The years of receipts I'd quietly cataloged. The pattern. Sylvia listened carefully. Then she said, "You've been the primary financial contributor for the duration of this marriage, and you have documentation." "Yes." "Then you're not starting from zero, Deja. You're starting from a position of strength. That conversation happened before the experiment. Before Veronica. Before day 3. I had always known, somewhere underneath the hope, that I might need a parachute. I just kept hoping I wouldn't have to use it. On day 23, the morning after the confrontation, I texted Sylvia 2 words, "Move forward." She replied immediately, already prepared. That afternoon, I opened a separate account at a different bank. Transferred my direct deposit. Called the mortgage company, the mortgage I'd been paying alone for 6 years, and began a formal inquiry about sole ownership rights. Richard came home to a woman who was perfectly calm. Cooking dinner. Asking about his day. He didn't understand that the calm was not peace. The calm was precision. Day 30. My brother walked through the front door at 11 a.m. Damon looks like our father. Broad. Deliberate. He's the kind of man whose stillness reads as authority. Richard has always been a little uneasy around him. I'd never fully understood why until now. Damon sees through performance. He always has. He hugged me, looked at me for a long moment, and said, "You look like yourself." I hadn't known how much I needed to hear that. Richard came downstairs. The 2 men greeted each other with the specific tension of people navigating something unsaid. We sat in the living room. I spoke first. "Richard. I've spent 30 days observing this marriage without interference. I stopped handling the finances that were yours to handle. I watched what happened." I looked at him steadily. "You noticed the cable subscriptions before you noticed me." His jaw tightened. "Deja. I found Veronica. I know how long. I know enough." I paused. "I've spoken to an attorney. The mortgage, the savings, the documentation, it's all been reviewed." Damon sat completely still. Support without performance. It grounded me. Richard looked between us. Then something broke in him. Not remorse, exactly. But the collapse of a man whose architecture has failed. "So that's it," he said. "That's it," I said softly. Not in anger, Richard. In clarity. He sat there for a long time. I watched him cycle through everything, betrayal, guilt, wounded pride, before landing on something that looked finally like shame. He left that evening with 2 bags. I sat with Damon on the back porch. And for the first time in weeks, I exhaled fully. "Proud of you," he said. "I'm proud of me too," I whispered. It has been 91 days since day 30. I want to tell you what life looks like now, because this story deserves an ending that is true, not triumphant in a Hollywood way, but true in a human way. The divorce is in process. Sylvia is excellent. The financial documentation I'd kept for 10 years, something Richard used to tease me about, calling me extra for saving receipts, turned out to be the architecture of my own freedom. The house is mine. We're working through the details, but the history is clear. Bianca and I talk every day. She apologized 100 times for February, and I forgave her 100 times. Because real friendship isn't flawless. It's honest, eventually. Kenneth reached out after Richard left. He said, "I saw it for years. I kept hoping he'd grow up. I'm sorry he didn't." I thanked him. I meant it. I don't know what happened with Veronica. And I genuinely don't need to. What I know is this: the 30 days didn't break my marriage. They revealed it. There is a profound difference. A broken thing fails. A revealed thing was always what it was. You just finally had the courage to look. My mother told me once, "Deja, you are too much woman to make yourself smaller for a man who won't grow." Artists, I hear you now. I am not bitter. Bitterness would mean I'm still giving Richard energy he doesn't deserve. I'm not. I'm free. I planted something new. And this time, I planted it in soil I own. If this story spoke to you, I'd genuinely love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had a turning point in a relationship where everything shifted because you finally took a stand? Share your experience in the comments. And while you're there, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I read more of your comments than you might expect. If these stories resonate with you, please like the video and subscribe. There are many more stories about life, family, and the choices that shape us. Thank you for listening.